All right, welcome. Today, we're going to unpack a theological framework that honestly shapes how millions and millions of people see the world. We're talking everything from headlines in the Middle East to their entire understanding of the future. And it all pivots around the nation of Israel and its role in what the Bible calls the end times.
So right at the heart of this whole thing is one massive question that theologians have debated for centuries. Has the Christian church completely replaced the nation of Israel in God's plan? Now that idea has a name. It's called Replacement Theology. The framework we're exploring today says absolutely not. And that answer changes literally everything that comes next.
So to even begin to answer that big question, the sources we're looking at argue that you have to go back, way back to the very beginning, to the foundational promises that God made to Israel. Getting a handle on what those promises were and what kind of promises they were, that's the absolute key to unlocking this entire prophetic view. And that brings us to this really core concept, the unconditional covenant. Okay, so think of it less like a contract you'd sign, where both people have to hold up their end of the deal. This is more like a one-sided, rock-solid promise. It's started by God, and according to this viewpoint, its fulfillment depends entirely on Him, not on whether people mess up or not. And this, right here, is the bedrock of the whole argument. The idea is that God made a whole series of these unconditional promises, these covenants, specifically with the nation of Israel. He promised them land, that they'd have descendants, an eternal kingdom, and eventually a total spiritual renewal. The critical point here, the thing you have to grab onto, is that these promises are seen as permanent, irrevocable. They just don't expire. This quote, it really just nails the core belief. The logic goes like this. If those covenants are truly unconditional and they depend only on God to be fulfilled, well, then they can't be broken. They can't be canceled. And they can't be handed off to somebody else, not even to the church. They simply stay in effect, just waiting for their ultimate fulfillment.
Okay, so if the promises to Israel are still active, if they haven't been transferred, that raises a huge question, right? Where in the world does the Christian church fit into the picture? Well, this framework has a pretty fascinating answer.
And the answer is, the church isn't a replacement for Israel at all, not even close. Instead, it's seen as a totally distinct, parallel program that's running at the same time. Think of it like two different groups, both part of God's single, overarching plan, but each with its own unique origin, its own identity, and its own destiny.
So let's break down those differences a bit. You see different origins, right? Israel traces its roots all the way back to Abraham, while the church, that's seen as beginning at Pentecost, way after Christ's ascension. They have different identities. One is very much a national, ethnic group, while the other is a spiritual body made up of believers from every nation on earth. And here's the big one. They have different promises. In this view, Israel's promises are primarily earthly. We're talking about actual land and a physical kingdom, while the church's promises are seen as primarily heavenly, focused on a spiritual inheritance.
So the crucial takeaway from this part is really simple. In this theological system, Israel is Israel, and the church is the church, period. One did not just absorb or replace the other. They're seen as having these unique roles and destinies that are both going to come to pass in the end. So if Israel and the church are on these two parallel tracks, the next obvious question is, where are the tracks heading? How does this all come together in the future? And that, my friends, brings us right into the heart of end times prophecy, or what theologians call eschatology. This framework proposes that all of history, everything we see happening, is moving toward a really dramatic conclusion. So after this long period where the church has been the main focus of God's work on earth, a major shift is coming. The prophetic spotlight, it's argued, is destined to swing right back and focus intensely on the nation of Israel once again. This timeline kind of lays out how it's all supposed to happen. Step 1 is where we are right now, the church age. It's often seen as a sort of prophetic parenthesis or a pause button on God's specific timeline for Israel. But then comes step 2, a future period of intense trial called the Tribulation, and that's when God's attention is believed to shift decisively back to national Israel. And all that culminates in step 3, the millennium, which is the time when all those ancient earthly promises to Israel are finally and completely fulfilled. And that brings us to this number, 1,000 years. This is the Millennial Kingdom, a literal 1,000-year reign of the Messiah on earth. It's during this time, in this framework, that all those unconditional promises of land, a kingdom, and national blessing that were made to Israel way back when, they find their complete physical fulfillment, right here on planet Earth. Okay, so we've walked through the covenants, the whole Israel versus the church distinction, and this future timeline. But so what?
Why does any of this actually matter today? What are the real-world implications of believing all this?
Well, the implications are actually pretty huge. This viewpoint directly influences how many people view the modern state of Israel and what's happening in the Middle East right now. For someone who believes this, news headlines aren't just random events. They can be seen as pieces of a larger prophetic story that's unfolding right before our eyes. And that creates this powerful, very real expectation for what the future is going to look like.
And really, this is the ultimate takeaway. Whether you personally agree with this view or not, it is so important to understand that this is not just some dusty, abstract theological debate for a seminary classroom. No way! It is a living, breathing framework that actively shapes the worldview, the politics, and the actions of a huge number of people around the globe.
So, we'll leave you with a question to mull over. Knowing that this is a core belief for so many, how might this prophetic framework, with its laser focus on Israel's guaranteed future, influence global conversations, politics, and maybe even our own perspectives on events unfolding in the Middle East? It's a powerful lens for sure, and understanding it is really key to understanding a big piece of our modern world.